the webinar of the Effective Statistician. And today we are talking about some things that pretty much everybody talks about all the time: being busy, being overwhelmed. And there's so much things that we can do to improve on that and be better in terms of productivity. But productivity is not the only topic we will talk about today. When I look back into my career, there were a lot of areas where I was really, really busy. I had far too much on my plate. I remember a time where I was going home in the evening and I thought, what did I have achieved today? I had only meetings and my inbox only get more cramped and there's even more kind of to-dos on my list. And it took me a lot of time to actually, even get behind things. And I was feeling like completely drowning in water. And maybe you have experienced something similar in your life where, there is just too many things going on. And I really needed to get out of that. So what did I do? I worked a lot on this to become better, and we'll speak about this today. But it's probably not something that only I feel, and there's a couple of things that for us statisticians makes that maybe especially prone. And with that, I hand over to Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Alexander. So as I think about my career and having managed many statisticians over the years and observed them, these are some realities I think that are true for most statisticians. I mean, first and foremost, we're technically minded people. That's where our strength is. That's where we devote a lot of our time. We tend to be very precise in our work, which again is how we're trained. That's most of the time a very good thing. Most statisticians I know, especially in industry, are in high demand. They're very busy. With the onset of data, accessibility, software, statisticians, quantitative people, data scientists are in high demand. We don't like to say no. A lot of us were sort of trained as sort of consultants, and we like to think of ourselves as serving people in a good way. And then collaborators often have a narrow view of us. And again, in my experiences early in my career and having viewed and talked with a lot of statisticians over the years, they can kind of put us in a box of sort of seeing us as having a very sort of defined skill set. And they see us as performing certain tasks. So some of these are good things. There's nothing bad about a lot of these. Did you go advance? But these realities, so they create some good and some bad. And the good part is that we often feel very busy. As Alexander just said, there's usually, at least in my experiences with my career and the people I managed, there was always plenty to do to keep us busy. Feel very valued, like we're being productive, like we're contributing to our organization or our cause. And those are good things, but the flip side is that these can keep us from growing professionally. Sometimes, again, we get so busy, as Alexander said, you sort of don't realize, the time goes by quickly. And, in this webinar, we're going to talk about some, goals and how to have greater impact and how to grow and how this sort of fits in with that. And so that high level impact could be limited. I've worked with a lot of people that have just sort of spun their wheels, again, being busy, feeling like they're contributing, but then they don't grow over a period of time. And as a result of this busyness, we lose some control over our careers and goals. So the question becomes, can we have the good and also avoid the bad? And I think the short answer is yes, and we'll spend much of today sort of talking about how you can do that. So next slide. So just a little bit about myself. Gary Sullivan. I worked at Eli Lilly and Company for 28 years, pharmaceutical company in Indianapolis, which is where I'm still located. I left Lilly in 2017 and I started my own business around leadership training for statisticians. I spent about half of my career in a technical role in the second half. different management roles. And for the last 10 years, at least the last 8 years at Lilly, the last few years I've been out in retirement or in semi-retirement, I've been doing leadership training. I did a lot of leadership training at Lilly. I've done quite a bit for the American Statistical Association. And now Alexander and I have partnered on some online leadership training that we'll be talking about later.
Yeah, and I'm a statistician for over 20 years as well. I'm still working at UCB. I've been at Lilly for 15 years, about 15 years, and spent most of the time in the post-approval market, so where it's a lot about HTA dossiers and payers and physicians interactions. And in this area, it's really important to be influential because you don't have a seat at the table by design, so to say. You know, in many regulatory meetings, they just expect a statistician to be there because you help to run the studies. But in the other settings, there's very often, it's a new area for statistician. So I was especially eager to learn a lot about leadership. And because there's always kind of a growing demand, I also was really eager to learn about productivity. And so if you look into the podcasts that I'm recording since nearly 3 years, it is a lot about innovation, knowledge, excellence, and especially also leadership. So in terms of this webinar today, if you have any questions, just type them into the chat and we'll either address them directly or we'll address them later when it comes up. So productivity is not about getting more done, but about working consistently towards your goal. It's about managing your energy, creating productive habits, and effectively managing your tool. And with that, I want to hand over to Gary that will then speak about a couple of these points, and then I will speak about a couple of other points.
Okay, next slide. So in terms of managing your energy, I'm going to talk about this notion of productivity and kind of dig down to get people to sort of think about where your time goes, how you sort of prioritize things, and maybe give you some ideas as to how you can sort of free up more time. And this is all around, again, being able to sort of focus on your goals. Because at the end of the day, I think statisticians, as excited as we are to sort of to the profession, ultimately we want to grow, we want to be challenged, we want to have more impact. And as you'll see at the end, that really kind of relates to developing certain soft skills and leadership skills. In order to do that, though, you really need to sort of make the most of your time, and that's what I'm going to sort of start with here. So we're going to talk about this notion called a productivity curve. We'll share with you the Eisenhower matrix, which is a real sort of simple way of prioritizing work, and it really is a good starter in terms of helping you understand, you know, what you're doing with your time, how projects come in, and how you sort of take them on or don't take them on. We'll talk about how that fits into or how your goals fit into that sort of a matrix and that prioritization. And I want to end with the idea of saying no and how this can really sort of help free up your time and pursue or devote more time to sort of pursuing your goals and your growth. So this is what I would sort of consider to be a productivity curve. Productivity you can think of as the amount of work you get done in a unit time. And you'll see there's no real axes here, but the idea is that everybody has some level of productivity. And I'll speak about this from my own personal experience, that if I worked 10, 15, 20, 40 hours a week, I had a certain level of productivity. But at some point, if you overwork yourself, you start to lose productivity. So in my career, I found that sweet spot to be about 55 or 60 hours. Now, I wouldn't work that many hours every week, but I realized that if I started pushing beyond that, my productivity would go down. And what I mean by that is I could spend, if I was working that 60th hour, that 61st hour, I just wasn't getting as much done. Okay, and I think everyone sort of needs to understand where that drop-off is. And as you'll see on the left side, sort of what affects your productivity curve, it's all these things. So if I was working that many hours, it would usually mean that I wasn't getting the right rest, or I wasn't exercising, or I would just be stressed because I had too much going on, that my home and family life was sort of falling out of balance. I wasn't spending enough time with my wife and my children and other sort of friends and relationships, or I wasn't doing social things that really sort of create that balance in your life. And so everybody, I think, needs to realize what their productivity curve is, and especially that point at which you become less productive. Now, I knew people that could work 80 hours a week and still be very productive, but I also knew people that their limit was at 35 or 40 or 45. And I think you have to first understand that. That's the time you have. And so sort of trying to squeeze out more time than that can be counterproductive no matter what you're doing with that time. So next slide, please. So this really sort of fits into this notion of the Eisenhower decision matrix. And it's a really sort of simple way of sort of classifying work as it comes in. And it's sort of broken down into two axes here, just a 2x2 table based on important, not important, urgent, not urgent. So as work comes in, sometimes there's urgency around it, and you can classify it as important or not important. And then within those categories, you can see sort of the interpretation. So something that's important and urgent is a do it now type of thing. A lot of our work probably falls into this, maybe more than we think, but usually this is work that has to do with projects that you're working on. If you're working in a for-profit company, you know, stuff that's in your portfolio, or different products that you're taking to market that are on timelines, and you're working as part of a team. So this is do it now stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's also stuff that comes in that's urgent and is not as important. And the idea would be to sort of try to delegate this in some way, shape, or form. We'll talk more section. There's also the not urgent, not important. And again, there are sort of levels of this. You can make this more complex if you want to, but maybe less important is a better way to put it, because there's stuff that sort of a customer may come and say, hey, could you do this analysis for me, or this task? And it may not rise to the level of the really important timeline-based project, but you just want to do it because maybe you've done stuff for them before. You don't want to sort of fight a battle and say, no, we'll talk about that. But the idea would be to try to sort of eliminate this type of work in some way, shape, or form. And then finally, there's the not urgent that is important. And this is really where your sort of career goals and your growth come into play. Typically, that's the stuff where we all have some sort of a development plan. We all have skills that we want to develop. We all have maybe technical methods we want to learn, or research that we want to do. And sometimes that gets put on the back burner because of all the other stuff. So in a sense, that's what we want to focus on in terms of how do we create that time to be able to do that type of work that will help us grow in our careers. Next slide, please. So this notion, it gets to this notion of integrating your goals into your work. And like I said, that D&G, what I'll call it, type of stuff falls in that scheduled plan activity. Need to take the time to create and assess these development and growth goals. Like I said, everyone has them. I know when I was in the industry, at the start of every year, I would put together some sort of a development plan. A lot of times at the mid-year, you then take a look at it and say, gosh, I haven't really gotten to any of that development stuff yet because I've just been overwhelmed with other projects that you think, oh, those are all important. But then over a period of time, you know, you come to learn that you're not really growing, or maybe you're not really focusing on your goals, or you're just writing them down. One thing is to identify projects and skills that really sort of maybe do integrate with your development and growth goals. If you can take on one of those important urgent projects that is going to challenge you and maybe help you develop different skills, whether non-technical or technical, that's perfect, okay? But there are other ways that you need to develop those goals, and that's some of the stuff that you sort of push aside, and that's where you need to dedicate time. So the challenge becomes sort of freeing up, like I said, this time to be able to delegate or eliminate that not important stuff so that you can free up the time to schedule and plan for some of the growth goals. So two quick things here. One is to engage your supervisor and or mentor if you have one. I say this just because as a supervisor for the last 15 years of my career, I would sort of welcome these discussions from my folks. And I'll sort of share some quick stories around that, but because they were the most valuable asset in the company, the people were. And if they weren't growing, if they weren't challenged, if they were getting frustrated or stressed, that's going to affect their productivity. That's going to affect my ability to manage my organization. So having these discussions to make sure that they were growing was a very important thing for me and for them. But the other idea is this notion of sort of learning to say no. And it kind of gets back to the notion that statisticians, we are sort of pleasers. We don't like to say no. We like to be busy. We are sort of trained to sort of support and serve people, again, which is a good thing in many ways. So this idea of saying no, there's a quote by Chris Voss. So Chris Voss was the chief FBI negotiator in the United States here for many years, and he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference. Really good book around negotiation if you want to read a good book. And he said, really, the negotiation doesn't start until someone says no. And if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense. So you can bring up the rest of the bullets there. So giving a positive no doesn't mean the work won't get done. Let me sort of share a quick story around this and sort of the second point, this notion of avoiding the sucker's choice. So a sucker's choice, when it comes to this type of thing, is that, you know, the example would be that you're really busy with something. One of your maybe regular customers comes in and says, hey, I need you to do this for me. And you feel like you're caught between choosing in either or. Either you serve the customer that I can do it, and you sort of stretch yourself out and put more workload on yourself and don't get to maybe those things where you're going to grow, or you say, I can't do it, in which case you're investing in yourself, but then you feel like you're sacrificing the relationship. That the customer is going to be upset with you and they're going to maybe not come back with you, and you've done some good work with them before. So we feel that we don't have a choice. We have to choose one or the other, and that's simply not the case. So a quick story, when I was in my first management role, I got a call from a chemist, a very sort of senior chemist. Actually, I had worked with him for quite a few years when I was in my technical role. And he called me up and he said, Gary, I just asked one of the people in your group to do some work for me, and they said no. And this is important work and it needs to get done. So I said, okay, let me go talk to him. I went to talk to the statistician, and he said, but I mean, it was like a Thursday, and he said that the person called him and said it needs to be done Monday. Well, I've got this project, this project, this project. There's just no time. Even if I didn't have these projects, that's really pushing the envelope on things. He said, so I had to say no. So I called up the scientist and I sort of explained it to him, and eventually the three of us sat down. And so my statistician sort of explained to the scientist and said, look, Mike, I'd like to do this, but these types of tasks require about at least 3 days. And I've got a lot of this other work to do, and you guys have to understand that we have other stuff and we can't just drop everything. And it turned out to be a really good conversation, because the scientist was just like, I had no idea. I had no idea that you had to do like a data integrity check. And then in addition to your analysis, you had to document it, understand the process. And we sort of decided that, you know, those types of projects will need about 5 days of lead time. And so for that one, we sort of came up with a compromise and said, okay, we'll try to get this done by end of day Tuesday. But in the future, it was, okay, we'll give you guys 5 days lead time, and we understand that. So the no turned out to be sort of a very sort of productive conversation that avoided that sucker's choice. It strengthened the relationship. It allowed the statistician to focus on their work, the other work that they had to do. And in a sense, everyone was the better for it. So this idea of saying no can really empower you. And like I said, when I supervise people, I would love to have these conversations. And if I took some work to them and I said, hey, this person called me and they need this work done, can you do it? And they said, no, I really can't. Well, help me understand why. What's on your plate? What are your priorities? And it was really, like I said, incumbent on me working with them, because the last thing I wanted to do was just pile work on them to the point where they would break, or they wouldn't feel that they're growing as statisticians. So this idea of really saying no, it's important. It's something I think that statisticians have to do to sort of own more of their career and be able to devote time on these goals that I think are really important. So with that, let me turn it over to Alexander, and we'll talk about the power of creating habits.
So in terms of, there's a couple of questions, and there is the Chris Voss book, The Never Split the Difference Negotiation as Your Life Depended on It. Yes, that is exactly this book. And there was a question about whether what you do if you're self-employed or if you're a student and you don't have a supervisor who can, help you to identify your priorities. I would say you need to be first clear on your goals and where you want to get to. And that helps you then to determine your priorities. And this is really important, and to keep your priorities and goals very visible all the time, because that helps you then to say no to the unimportant things, or also say no to things that you would like to do, but you just don't have the time to do. I can tell you that as working in pharmaceutical companies, I rather have a CRO telling me we can't do that than to say yes and then don't deliver. I rather have a CRO telling me, no, we can't do it this week, but we could do it next week or something like this. Then we can have a discussion about a prioritization and these kind of things. But it's really difficult if people don't push back on it, because then we never get into the negotiation, and then usually bad things happen. What's your experience, Gary?
Yeah, similar. I was going to say I had a statistician who would come to me a lot, and he'd say, hey, I got invited to give this talk. And there was almost an implicit, like, can I go? And I would talk to him and say, like, okay, how does this fit in with your goals? I mean, I know it's nice to be asked to give a talk, but are you going to grow from this? Is it a talk that you've given before? Is this a place where you're going to be able to make new contacts? I sort of really pressed him on, is there a reason that's going to be good for you to go and do this? And for the company, because it was company time. He would come to the conclusion, like, you're right. It's nice to be asked, but I'll have other opportunities. So I think it's that notion of sort of checking yourself if you can, or use your supervisor in some ways to check yourself.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just the fear of missing out. And
yeah.
Yes, there's usually more where this is coming from. So usually these kind of opportunities come again later. Okay, so let's speak about something else, creating productive habits. What are your habits? We all have habits. We have good habits, we have bad habits, we have habits that we are conscious of, and we have these unconscious habits. But what's really important about habits is that we understand which ones we have and how they actually form. And there's a really, really nice book by James Clear that's called Atomic Habits. And he says that you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the levels of your systems. And that's really, really clear, because the habits, they get you through the day, every day. The goals you maybe set at the beginning and they pull you forward, but the habits, they control us all the time. And if we are not conscious about these habits, we can really not be very, very productive. And then we lose a lot of time that is just wasted, a lot of energy that is just wasted. So in order to make good habits or break bad habits, we first need to understand what are the stages of a habit. So how does a habit, behave? And there's always first a cue. The cue kind of is trigger something, and these can be all kind of different cues. It can be internal or external cues. Yeah, so it could be, for example, an internal cue like I'm bored. or it can be an external cue, like the phone is ringing. And that then triggers some craving of us. And craving is, for example, I don't want to get bored. I want to, get entertained, get excited, or I want to know who's on the phone. I'm curious, and this curiosity wants to be satisfied. So, and then there's a response. So response is, for example, I'm taking up the phone, or I'm going onto Facebook or something like this. And then there's a reward. Yeah, now I'm entertained and I get some dopamine hit in my brain that makes me feel good. And it's always working like this. Yeah. So you can have all kind of different habits. And if you really think through it, you'll have always these 4 stages. So this is just an example. Yeah, a message notification comes up, and that's a little bit the bad thing about this. The people that design these tools, these smartphones, these apps, they know about that exactly, and they exploit that. Yeah, there's a message coming up, and of course everybody is curious. Yeah. Do you know the time when we were kind of excited about you've got mail? Yeah, of course, everybody was opening the inbox. Then it's kind of, oh, there's a new Facebook thing, or there's a new whatever instant messaging or whatever is on you. And then you are curious and you open the app and read. And your curiosity gets satisfied, and that reinforces the habit to be built and built and built and built. So that you, at one point, do it completely automatically, maybe completely, not even consciously. So what's really important for productivity is to identify good habits, design good habits consciously, and identify the bad habits and break them. So one of my most important habits that I have is my start of the business day habit. It really helps me get going in the most productive way in the morning. And I designed it consciously because I had a bad habit at the morning earlier. I was usually kind of, turn on the PC, get some coffee, chat with some colleagues, because at the time it took quite a long time to start the PC. Then I would, open Outlook, go directly into the email, and then, spend most of the morning reading emails. And I would see, oh, there's a meeting coming up. Oh, did I prepare? Oh, no. Okay, let's jump unprepared into the meeting. And at the end of the day, I was thinking like, what did I do today? So I redesigned my morning routine. So I very consciously put water and coffee on my desk, because that helps me to get hydrated throughout the day. And then the first thing I do is I review my goals, my yearly goals. I review them every morning, so that I'm conscious of what can I do today that brings me closer to these goals. Then I review my calendar and see what is on there. I review my to-do list, and then I determine what are the 3 big tasks that I need to get done today in order to move forward closer to my goals. And these are the really important ones. And I'm happy if I get all of these 3 done. 3 is really good because it helps you to kind of get them reminded. That's the rule of 3. And it's also something that is reasonable. If you have 10, you usually get the day ending with maybe a 4 or 5 done, but it's always depressing because I've never achieved everything. Here it's kind of, I have 3, and if I take more done, then that's a bonus. And I directly start with a big one. So that is also another kind of good start into the day. So how do you create a habit? There's 4 things, for each of these 4 stages, there's some things that you can look into. The first one make it obvious. So for example, I have my, my calendar with my goals on my table, on my desk. So it's directly obvious that I start with that. Make it attractive. Well, I really like coffee, and so that helps me to kind of get it going. Make it easy, yeah? So something where you need to put a lot of effort in is really difficult. So for example, if you want to make sure you go running, then have everything set up for the running, you know, have your running gear in your bathroom so you can directly pick it up. Make it satisfying. Yeah, so for example, I really wanted to run a lot. So after each run, I took a screenshot of my running app and send it to a colleague. And then I always get well done back. So that's the satisfaction. There's all kind of different things that you can do about that, but make it conscious so that you can create good habits. And then the other thing is breaking bad habits. Yeah, so kind of picking up the phone or things like that all the time. Make it invisible. Just delete the notifications. Yeah, just, you know, turn them off. Then, you know, you already have no cue and you don't get into the habit. Make it unattractive. Yeah, so is it, you know, maybe you need to kind of monitor what is your motivation behind it and really think about the, you know, negative consequences. Make it hard to respond. Just put your phone somewhere far away, you know, out of the room. Then, you know, it's really difficult to grab it just unconsciously, and make it unsatisfying. I know people that, you know, have something like if they break their running streak, then they need to pay a football club that they hate 50 euros, or they need to kind of, you know, have set up goals that they would need to wear this T-shirt to the next club game or something like this. So there's all kind of different things that you can do. There's a special tip that is about redesign the cue. So for example, I get bored, I grab the phone, I get bored, I take a deep breath and recommit to what I'm just doing. Manage tools and attention. I think this is really important, especially for us as statisticians. We are brain workers, and our brain can only work effectively if it's concentrated for a longer time. If you get all the time distracted, most of the tasks that we do take immensely long. So manage distractions. Have good meetings practices. Schedule what is really important for you so that you have time for it. And take ownership for these. You know, it's not something that is done to you, it's something that you choose to do. Never multitask. Just never. So if you're in a meeting, be really in a meeting. If you're writing an email, just write this email. If you're reviewing a paper, just do that. If you're reading a paper, just do this. And do one thing at a time, because multitasking is a myth. We are actually splitting, you know, our brain can just focus on one at a time. And when we switch from one to the other, there's always something kind of part in our brain that has stayed with the other task. And so it really is a big time changer, a big productivity game to never multitask. Reduce external distraction. We already talked about the turning off any notifications on all your different devices, but also reduce visual clutter. Yeah, so have something that is clean so that you're not tempted to, you know, grab all kind of different things. Yeah, for example, if you work on your screen, yeah, make sure that the only thing that you see on your screen is really the things that you're working on, and not you know, have a little window with the instant messaging there, or something like the inbox open or something like this. And the last thing is really important. Plan focus time. Put it in your calendar. Every morning, my most precious hours are the hours up to about 9:30. And I've blocked these for deep thinking time, where I do the most important things, where I prepare a presentation, where I review a paper, where I, you know, do the things that really turn the needle. Find the right location for that. Yeah, so maybe you need to have a specific location. Maybe it's not your desk, but maybe something where you're not distracted. And then turn off email, turn off your phone, and really concentrate on it. I can tell you this is probably the most satisfying time of your day, because you get immensely things done, and it's really enjoyable. You can even get into this flow of just doing something, and time passes by as, you know, as nothing. And you really think like, wow, what I've achieved in these 2 hours. Reduce internal distractions. Identify your internal triggers. Yeah. Is it getting bored? Is it getting stuck? Is it getting sidetracked? Very often kind of, I have that as well. Yeah, so it's kind of, it gets difficult, and this difficulty makes you go away and do something more easy. That if that happens, you know, if you have a clear calendar, you get back to it. You notice it and says, okay, go back. If you have a crazy idea in your head that comes to your mind, oh, I need to, don't know, grab some food, or I need to, you know, call my assistant, or I need to, you know, go to the hairdresser, like I need very, very often, then, you know, just write that down on a notebook and concentrate on that. There's one really nice thing that I practiced a couple of times, is using an accountability partner. And if you're working virtually, like most of us are now, you can use this focusmate.com, where you can book a time with an accountability partner, and you both hold yourself accountable to work focused for 45 minutes on just one thing. Distractions in meetings is really, really a big, big topic. How many meetings do we go to where we, after some time, have the kind of feelings that only maybe a quarter of the people are still listening, are still kind of really mentally there? I think turning on the video is one of the best things that you can do to really stay present in the meeting, because then, you know, you have a connection to the others. If people just see your avatar, it's bad. Close your laptop in face-to-face meetings. Yeah, just use paper. Usually that is much more productive. Yeah, there's so many things on your PC that can distract you. And I've been in too many meetings where, you know, people were then starting with emails and things like this. And every meeting is a big opportunity to build relationships, to gain knowledge, to create opportunities for you, and lay the path to influence, to further shape your career. There's a couple of things that I would recommend in terms of reading. One of the first books I read about productivity was Getting Things Done by David Allen. It's an absolute classic. And I'm not, you know, advocating that you need to follow the Getting Things Done methodology to a point, but I think there's a couple of really, really nice takeaways in it. So one thing basically talks about how you can understand what are the really important things that you need to do first, so that if these things fall, then everything else becomes easier. Essentialism is probably a very, very good book, because it helps you to understand that there's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of clutter in our work that we can probably completely reduce. We just don't do anymore. It's really surprising if you know how many reports we generate in our industry that nobody reads, or that have no kind of, follow-up decision on it. See what is really, really important and focus on that. Atomic Habits, I talked about this, says this with the 4 different stages. And Deep Work is an awesome book that helps you to understand how to get into this deep work and what further tricks and tips that I haven't covered today.
So there were a couple questions. One was about whether the slides would be made available after the presentation.
Yep. We'll put that on the homepage, and also we'll make the recording available as well.
And then there was a question about when you were talking about, asked what an example of a goal, or what can you give an example?
The goals that I look into every day. Yeah, these are my yearly goals. So for example, it would be one of my yearly goals is to publish more than 50 episodes on the podcast. And so I look into this every day and make sure that, my editorial calendar is well filled. And if I see, I need to put in some more efforts, then I schedule time to record another episode.
Yeah, well, another thing about goals, and again, based on my time as a statistician and in management, I would really try to, when I would work with people in my group, I would try to make sure that they would constrain themselves to like 3 to 5 big goals a year. And I found that the most productive people were the ones that had a very sort of defined and almost limited number of goals. And when work would come in, they would sort of see, does that fit with a goal in any sort of way, shape, or form? And if it didn't, that's when we would have the conversation about whether they would do it or whether we would try to delegate it to someone else in my group. So having goals, I think, is very important. Having, like I said, 3 to 5 sort of high-level goals, and maybe one of those should be something around your own personal growth and development, I think is really important. And then, as Alexander said, sort of keep coming back to, does this fit in with my goals? When something lands on your plate, is it something that fits in with your goals? Now, maybe it doesn't, and it has to, and maybe then you need to sort of rethink your goals, but you can't sort of constantly be, adding on, yeah, I'll take this on, I'll take this on, I'll take this on. It gets into that trap of, that's when, going back to some of the distractions thing in the meetings, is that when you become sort of so busy and so in some ways sort of calendar congested, that you just then start doing and doing and doing without thinking, is this helping me in the long term?
Yeah, and the important thing is you need to have goals that stretch you, that requires you to develop. And for example, with the podcast episodes, that helps me to become a better speaker, that helps me to better engage with other people, and it always kind of helps me to also grow my network and work with new people, work on new topics, come up with new ideas, and learn about other things. And so that's a nice goal from that perspective.
Yeah, I think one thing you said there that I think everyone needs to keep asking themselves, if nothing else, is how am I challenging myself? How am I stretching myself? How am I growing as a statistician? I think that's a real sort of simple question each of us can ask ourselves sort of every day, or at least every week, just to make sure that we don't sort of fall into that trap of just doing things that come across our desks.
Yeah, in terms of goals, I also have a podcast episode about that speaks about the Smarter Goals system. So just go to the podcast episode on that one. Okay, so what does this all have to do with leadership, Gary?
So let's sort of get into that. Again, it kind of ties back to this notion of people wanting to grow as statisticians and really, I think, have impact. I know in my career, and I think in your career too, that you start working, then you get to a point where, okay, what's kind of the next thing? I need a new challenge. I need something that's going to push me or stretch me, or I've kind of figured this out and I feel comfortable with this. I want to sort of push myself in a different direction. And really it all comes down to, I think, wanting to grow and impact. And one definition we have of leadership is the ability to consistently deliver value to an organization or cause by persuading others to act on our ideas. And that's what we do as statisticians. I mean, we have a lot of good technical training. As I said, we're technically minded, we're constantly learning, developing, picking up new methods, and we want to apply those methods. And part of the challenge is, how do we get people to sort of buy into those ideas? Because that's something where it challenges us, it moves the organization forward, it allows us to have greater impact, it allows us to grow, it allows the organization to grow. And these, some people sort of refer to these as soft skills. I just call them sort of leadership skills, but it gets back to this notion of influence without authority. And that requires skillful communication, trusting relationships, a keen understanding of the business or the science or your organization or the operational processes, all those things, and then negotiation skills, to name a few, and there are others as well. And these are things that we teach in our leadership training, and there are things that you need to invest in to develop and hone those skills. So I think statisticians can get kind of frustrated by they're doing work, then they have a new idea, and they try to get someone to buy into that idea, and the person won't buy into it. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and that's something we get into quite heavily in our course, because that's the way that you grow, by trying to apply a new method to an area, to try to advance that area, to save cycle time, to save money, to gather data more efficiently, to get more insight into a problem or a project. And those are the types of things that can frustrate us. So you get into sort of this circle of, you know, I want to have more impact, I'm too busy, I need to learn skills, I don't have the time, and that's where the frustration. So if you can get into a more virtuous cycle of maintaining your schedule, being able to sort of focus on your goals, make sure that they match the work that you're doing, learn and develop skills that can help you be more influential and be more impactful, then it becomes a more challenging, and I think people are sort of happier in their roles.
Yeah, it's exactly kind of this point. You can increase your productivity to a lot of extent, but you can still work on all the different, on all the wrong projects, yeah, on the things that really don't turn the needle. And if you want to work on the really important things, you need to understand what these are. How can you align your goals with the organizational goals, with the goals of your partners, the goals of the other stakeholders? And for that, you need to have these leadership skills. And the bigger the goals are, the more of these leadership skills you'll need. So let's talk in the next part a little bit about the new Effective Statistician Leadership Program.
So before we do, there was a question
okay.
Someone had about, do you have any suggestions for trying to have some control over your calendar when you don't have full control? So before we get into the program, let's just answer that. And so you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, I can first take a shot at that. In terms of my calendar, first, I think I would probably never just allow my AA to control my calendar. I also don't have an AA, but that's another point. Because what's on my calendar really controls what gets done. And I want to have priority on that. So first I put in, meetings that are the most important for me. And this is, for example, vacation time with my family. Then I put in things that are really, really important for me to get work done. These are meetings with myself. And these are on my calendar. And so then there is another appointment, and it's much more unlikely that someone will schedule over this appointment. I also have actually meetings with myself for lunch, because otherwise I had the experience that I would get back-to-back meetings from morning to evening, and I wouldn't have time to eat lunch. And you don't want to work with me if I didn't have lunch. So that was quite important as well.
Yeah, I think it gets back to some of the things Alexander talked about in terms of reviewing your schedule and your calendar, and really sort of being honest about, is this something I need to do? Does it need to get done today? Does it fit in? I mean, I was in a management role and sometimes would have a really busy calendar, and And I was fortunate enough to have an administrative assistant, and we would have discussions about this. And I would say at times, you know, Chris, I need some time this afternoon or tomorrow afternoon. Can you take these meetings and move them out? Because again, it wasn't necessarily canceling them. It was just deferring them until later. And I would even make sure that I would say, check with the people and make sure it's okay that we do that. But it gets back to just what Alexander said, making sure that I have time to think and to get things done. This notion of packing your calendar with meetings, that I really came to the conclusion that you really need to prepare for every meeting, because it really is an opportunity. And by going from meeting to meeting, you don't do the people in the meeting any sort of help by not at least thinking about what's the agenda, who's going to be in the meeting, what are we going to talk about, what's my position on that, what role do I need to play here, what do I want to accomplish in this meeting personally, what do we need to accomplish as a team. If you're just running from meeting to meeting, then that's inefficient. So in a sense, I was being, I think, fair to the people that I was meeting with by sort of putting things off or rescheduling, whether they were one-on-ones or small group meetings or things like that. So again, I think it gets back to this notion of being able to say no and seeing what happens. And it might force a conversation that actually makes things much better for you.
It's a very natural filter for, you know, for your time, you know, because there's only so much time that you have. You can't kind of, you know, everybody has the same amount of time. And this is really important. How can this cycle be broken? Well, for me, you know, is you can't, you know, maybe the next 2 weeks are still kind of crazy, but usually thereafter, the calendar gets more kind of sparse. So put in meetings with yourself, you know, at least from 2 weeks onwards. You know, I have these meetings with myself, they are never ending. You know, every work day I have the same kind of meetings with myself. And sometimes if I know there is a really important project coming up and I need to, you know, have 2 hours to prepare some slides somewhere, I put these in with myself. And that's a reminder for myself that I need this day to work on something else. You can't just, you know, move it around. And this is how I think you can break this cycle.
Yeah, I think that some of the question was about distractions because of COVID. A lot of us are working from home, and I feel for you there. I was never one that could work at home. Now I have to work at home all the time now because I'm self-employed. That's a challenge. Some things I would do sometimes are just to change where I work, just to sort of stay fresh. Last week I was teaching a short course, and in preparation for that, I decided to sort of change my location from the study room that I do have set up to just going into the basement. And it was just a change of scenery that allowed me to focus a little better. So I think this is a challenge. I don't have any quick answers. I used to sort of go to the library just to get out of the house. So I couldn't, you know, be distracted by going and get a snack or going and you know, looking outside, or those types of things. So it's a challenge, but I think you just have to kind of try to come up with creative ways to do it, or just maybe give yourself more distractions. And if you can, because I've got older children, so I can work in the evening. So sometimes I would just say, I'm going to stop work at 2 because I'm not really focused, but I'm going to then work from 8 to 10 tonight. So maybe being taking advantage of some of that flexibility.
Yeah, so in terms of not working, you know, endless into the evening, there's another good habit to have, and that is a work shutdown habit. Yeah, and to make sure you get everything off your plate, and then just, you know, get it really out of your head so you have a good feeling. And then, you know, really power down your PC, yeah, and put away your work smartphone. I have a private one and a work smartphone exactly for that reason. So I can't be tempted to read my work emails in the evening. And thanks for Eleni for recommending one of the episodes on that. Okay, so with that, think we answered all the questions. Let's move into the leadership program. Because as Gary and myself talked about, this will really help you to work on the most important things. This will help you to grow your career for a very long time. And unlike productivity that has kind of a natural boundary, you can become a better and better leader all the time. Gary and myself still speak about leadership and how we are improving, and even through, you know, reading new books, trying things new out, improving our presentation skills, we are getting better and better all the time. So how is this course designed? It's basically designed, Gary and myself talked about this, how we would like to have had a course when we were earlier in our careers. So we spend a lot of time reading books, going to meetings, going to listen to podcasts, trying things out. And so we learned it kind of the hard way. But we wanted to create a course that speeds up all this process, that gets it faster, so that you can learn the foundations of the leadership, you can increase your influence, and you can develop an actionable plan for sustained leadership development, so that you really become a student of leadership. That is one of the things that we all talk about. And in our course, we give you a framework to understand what leadership is, what are all the different skills that you need in order to make the right connections and see clearly where are the things that you need to improve on, where are the things you're already good on, because there's a lot of things that we as statisticians are really good on that we are not conscious about. So how does the course look like? From a course structure, we have 3 different modules with self-learning. So this is mostly videos and a couple of assignments and things like this. And for each of the modules, you can have also additional mastermind groups. What are these mastermind groups? The mastermind groups are small group discussions that are led by Gary or also by me from time to time maybe, and they help to better reflect on the course material. There you can speak about the assignments that you have and reflect and learn from it. And there's for each of these 3 modules, there's 3 mastermind sessions. Gary, any additions on the mastermind sessions?
Yeah, I would say I think an important part of leadership development is the notion of reflecting, but also of sort of sharing your perspectives and your thinking around it with other people. Again, I've noticed over the years that some of the best things when I teach leadership training, when we do the surveys after the courses, that people tend to really like, we'll have like small table discussions. And they just love that because they're able to sort of articulate, okay, here's what I'm hearing, or here's what I'm thinking, or here's an experience I had, or does this fit in? And those things just really help. So I'm a big advocate for, in leadership training, doing whatever you can to try to incorporate some form of discussion.
Yeah, I think there's basically 2 parts of people. Some people that really enjoy these discussions, and some that really are more for self-learning, or they, you know, just want to be very, very flexible and don't want to commit to a specific time. But all of those that actively participated in the masterminds really benefited from it. So what are the course topics? The 3 modules have 3 different topics which will very much kind of build on each other. So first is about leadership essentials and communication. What is really leadership and how can you learn it? Then we will talk about all the communication aspects, about active listening. We'll have a special emphasis on presenting with impact, because we know that presenting data is one of the key things that we need to be really good at as statisticians. The second module is about trust and teamwork. This is fundamental to influence, because without trust, you can't influence anything. You know, if you think about yourself if you have someone else that you don't trust, you don't listen to that person. The last part is about business acumen, influence, and decision making. What is business acumen? Business acumen is really understanding how an organization works and having a cunning insight into this. Understanding the bigger picture. And so there we will basically kind of wrap up all the different components and help you to understand how you can influence and drive change. And based on that, you will then develop your own leadership principles and their own actionable plan.
So real quick here on the trust, if you go back to the trust and teamwork, I do want to emphasize, and it's written there, maybe we should have had it in the title, is that we also cover sort of conflict resolution and negotiation. And that's a part I think statisticians really can sort of struggle with, this notion of how do I push back appropriately when I'm in a tense situation? How do I have that conversation? And there's some really good ways and techniques to sort of handle these things. And the other thing I'll say about just the course is that when I started doing leadership training years ago and started developing courses, this course is very different than the courses I taught years ago. And it's because it has evolved over time in terms of me doing a lot of self-reflection around how do you present these topics in a way that they can build on themselves? What are the key topics that people need to learn first, second, third? And how does it sort of all culminate in being able to ultimately influence and lead? So there is a sort of a method to the madness here that's been that has evolved over a period of time with a lot of sort of experience.
Yeah, and we have run this program now twice and learned a lot from that and build it into this new program. There's always also a bonus in terms of a private LinkedIn group. So only the members of the Effective Leadership program are in that. And that helps you to get in touch, answer questions, get additional content. So throughout the program, we are quite active in there. And so this private LinkedIn group, you will also meet the people that have been before you through the program, and you'll meet people that come after you. Now, what does it cost? Our prior program was much more expensive. We had about 2,000 euros as a price point. And we saw that created lots of difficulties for people. It was really good from an interactivity point of view because we had lots of masterminds, we had lots of face-to-face time with the different people, but that also made it a burden for some of the people and also burden on the cost perspective. So we have reshaped it in a way that we have the 3 self-learning modules, and each of them is 159. And if you take one of these, you can also book the mastermind together with it. If you purchase all the 3 modules together, then you get a bonus and you only pay $397, which is about $464. If you want to then on top have the all the 3 mastermind things, you get an additional bonus, and then it's just 546 altogether. And the nice thing is there's no additional travel, there's no additional accommodation and things like that. You get onto your own thing. I just had a discussion with head of the CRO, actually the owner of the CRO, and she said, "Oh, that's a really good price for the money." Most of the other things, leadership training courses that she had sent people on, are far more expensive. Usually involves travel and is a lot of away time from the job. So maybe you can convince your supervisor to say, "I will do that on my own time if you just pay for me the course." But because everybody kind of needs to get into the mastermind together, this offer ends on October 19th. And so you'll have about 3 weeks from now to enroll into the program. and to have a discussion with your supervisor. Then the start of the course is exactly on that day, and the first masterminds will start early of November, because we need a little bit of time to make sure that everybody gets into the right spot. How can you enroll? Well, you just head over to the homepage, The Effective Statistician, and there you have all the details of that. You have additional descriptions, and you also have something else, some arguments for your supervisor. I know if I would be a supervisor, I would always ask a couple of questions. And Gary is a long-time supervisor, so has a lot of insight into what questions people would usually ask. And he has wrote 5 really good reasons why your supervisor would benefit from it, why your organization actually benefits from it. So how long do you have access to this program? Lifetime. So lifetime means, of course, as long as we run this program, and we already run it for some time. So I think lifetime will be quite long. And you'll also get all the updates. Yeah. If you're doing additional material, you'll get all that in the program as well. But I don't have the time, I hear very often. Well, we just talked about time management. We just talked about productivity, and that this is really the things that are important, but maybe not urgent, but you need to make time for it. And a lot of these practices is actually on your day-to-day job. And by doing these more effectively, yeah, you will gain even more time in the future. So you need to invest a little bit upfront in terms of time to gain more time in the end. What happens with the masterminds after the course? Well, you can keep in touch. You have been working then for a couple of months on it, and you have established relationship, and you have become a leader. So shouldn't be a problem to kind of keep lead by yourself and keep in touch. But if it's not for you, that's not a problem. We have a full 30-day money-back guarantee, and you can just pull out of it for any reason. Yeah. Of course, I would like to know what was the reason, and that would be quite nice to know, but that's no problem whatsoever. So in summary, you can fast track your statistical leadership development. It takes approximately 5 months. That depends a little bit on the breaks. The self-learning is only $397 for all the 3 modules together. It's about $464. That always depends a little bit on the ratio. With the masterminds, it's only 546, and the offer ends on October 19th. And just go to theeffectivestatistician.com, and there you can find all the details, and you can also enroll.
We had a couple of questions that came across. I think the first one is the leadership program for self-employed people mainly, or those working in industry. Would it be relevant for people in academia? Also, will the course report next year? So the answer to the first 3 questions, I think, is it is for everybody. I think in any role where you sort of find yourself wanting to influence people or change the way they think, or guide them in thinking in a different way. Again, it gets back to persuading people to act on your ideas. If you have ideas and you have sort of a customer base or a collaborator base, and you want to try to influence people with those ideas, then in a sense, that's leadership. I've been in both roles. I mean, I worked in industry for a long period of time, obviously. From that experience, this was very important from that standpoint. I'm now self-employed, and I find a lot of what I'm teaching, it's like, yeah, I need to remember to do that, because again, trying to sort of get people to act, trying to be influential. Mostly in my role now, it's via communication, but also from a standpoint, we find ourselves creating sort of something right now. So those skills come into play. The whole business acumen, organizational acumen, how organizations function, who makes decisions, all those things. So all that sort of comes into play. I think this course will serve you for years and years and years, as many years as you want to remain a professional.
It probably even helps you outside of your profession because
Yeah.
you need to have these leadership skills, maybe also at home. At least with my kids, I have that quite a lot. But I train everybody in my team about these kind of things because everybody of them needs to be really good in these to do their job effectively. If they have a great idea, but they can't convince their study team or their project team to implement it, it's useless. They can be the best statisticians in the world. If they can't convince their peers from the medics, the regulatory, the medical writers that they work with, that there's a better way of doing it, all the statistics experience is completely lost. And there's nothing so frustrating than having a great idea, but can't convincing your project team to act on it. And I've been in these kind of situations so often. I've seen people from my team being in these situations so often that I was really, really very, very grateful to learn about these leadership skills, because then I knew I can take a different approach to it. I knew where things went wrong. I could reflect on myself, okay, in this framework, where are the pieces that are missing? And then exactly kind of work on these topics.
The other question about will the course repeat next year? I guess the answer is kind of yes, but I'll let Alexander sort of expand on that.
Yeah, likely, but we haven't decided yet. Any other questions?
So someone just, I am just here, is it a course?
Yes. So we talked in the beginning about lots of the productivity things. And then we also now talk about this course, and you can find, we'll put the recording on the homepage so you can find it there. I'm a big fan of the podcast. Thanks so much. Yeah. And actually on the podcast, I speak a lot about leadership. I talk a lot about kind of the learnings. I recently had an episode where I needed to convince someone to give me their slides. I had only 15 minutes. I've never met that person before. So how do I get from a person that is known to be very, very protective of their slides to get their slides in 15 minutes? I managed it in 10. How did I do this? I applied all these leadership skills. I didn't go directly in her and ask, I need your slides. I first built relationship with this person. I built some trust with this person. I found out that we have actually a common friend together. And this kind of friendship helped me quite a lot to understand better where the other person is coming from. And yeah, through these kind of leadership skills, I got my job done, and that helped me quite a lot later this day.
So I see a couple comments about people. The question is, will we be able to accommodate people globally? And the answer is yes. That's why when we get to the sort of the mastermind part, especially, that we'll set up the time so that it is, so that someone's not having to wake up at 2 in the morning to do the masterminds, that it's in the course of their daytime hours. So.
Yeah, and yes, you can also pay through PayPal. Okay.
Yeah, so I would just, again, from a personal experience, I retired from Lilly in 2017, and I retired with the intent of putting together these types of training courses and trying to train statisticians. It's something I became very passionate about at Lilly, and I became convinced that this is not something that, and most statisticians figure these things out over the course. But what I found is by teaching them, you can save people a lot of years. In a sense, you know, what took us, like I said, 20, 25 years to figure out, would like to teach to you so that it can get ingrained in you in, you know, maybe 10 or less. I think, again, from a standpoint of helping the profession really have the impact that it should, and everyone knows just how data and statistics is being used, how quantitative methods are being used, and they've, in a sense, changed the world in many ways. Statisticians need to play an integral part in that. We're best equipped, and the frustrations of I've got the ideas, but I just can't get people to buy in. This is sort of the solution for that in a way. So I mean, I don't know if that more and more these types of sessions, focus for conferences is popping up in terms of, you know, leadership. The regulatory industry workshop here in the States from last week, the theme was sort of leadership and innovation, and it was really appropriate because you really can't innovate if you can't lead. It's really that simple. So I'm a big fan of, like I said, having people invest in these tools and skills, and I really do think they'll pay dividends over your career.
Yeah. So when we begin? Yeah. So you can sign up basically directly now, and the material will then be released, the first module, on October 19th. And then sooner thereafter, it becomes module 2 and then module 3. So we staggered that a little bit to not make it too overwhelming, because yeah, if you get everything at once, it can be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, and Alexander made the comment about becoming students of leadership, and it really is kind of appropriate in terms of some of the topics today in terms of developing habits. Because what I've learned over my career is that you need to develop the habit of becoming a student of leadership, just like you're a student of maybe technical statistics, that it's something that you need to sort of think about on a regular basis. And I do the training courses, half-day training courses, you know, one-day training courses. Last month I taught a course that was sort of staggered over 2 weeks. I think the really powerful thing about this type of course is that you sort of learn a little bit every week, and you create the habit of investing in your leadership, because you have to, because you're signed up for the course, but 1 or 2 hours a week. And then after so many months, that carries forth. And then you don't have to sort of trigger yourself that you're sort of constantly thinking about it. So Alexander and I have sort of gotten into the habit, I'll never break the habit of sort of constantly thinking about leadership. But that's the habit that we want to try to get people to form, especially statisticians. And so doing a section in a module once a week, doing a mastermind group the next week, starting another section, that's why it's sort of intended to be sort of a 4 to 5 week program. Even if you don't do the masterminds, there are assignments that we will ask you to do as part of sort of integrating the learning and the concepts into your everyday work life. So it really is kind of set up to sort of create this habit of being a student, to apply the skills as you learn them so that they can become integrated into your everyday sort of work style.
Yeah. So masterminds is really, these are about 10 people that get together on a Zoom call. And then we will talk about a specific part of the training material. We'll talk about the assignments that were from the respective lecture and reflect together about it. And so if you have then implemented that in your day-to-day job, you will have, you know, learned something new about it. Or maybe, you know, you had a very, very good experience. We had one student who, based on one of the assignment, reached out to a safety physician. This safety physician would kind of get a long list of an Excel spreadsheet with lots of details on the different patients from him. And he asked, what do you do actually with this? And he said, well, I spend a day to ballpark through this and see whether there's any safety findings in these, and whether we can go to the next dose for this dose escalation study. And he said, you look into these by patient listings? And he went home and said, oh, I can actually help this physician. And so he programmed our Shiny app to visualize this data for him and showed it to the safety physician the other day. And the safety physician was, wow, now I can do what took me hours in 10 minutes because I directly see what is happening. And so this is where our course is designed to help you. It's designed to improve your leadership skills in everyday life. And of course, now this relationship with this physician is much better. Yeah, he learned that if you look behind the scenes, if you understand what's really going on, you can have improved things and have really an impact. And instead of then, you know, providing just Excel sheets with long listings, just put it into the app and he sees what's going on.
So there's another question I want to be clear about. So can we talk about problems about some statistics techniques? That's really not the intention of the course. So what we can talk about is if you want to try to change the thinking around a statistics technique, how do you change the thinking? But the course is really not designed to sort of banter about on is this method better or this method better in terms of just discussion between statisticians. We can talk about how can you convince other statisticians that the method is better, but it's not going to be sort of a technical debate type of a group discussion.
Yeah. There's already lots of content regarding this, but there's really not a lot regarding the leadership skills.
Yeah, it's really, I think, an unmet need in our profession. Yeah.
If you just think about the COVID-19 situation, yeah, how many data is there? How many visualizations is out there? And how many statisticians do you see explaining this data? Nearly nobody, yeah? And it's such a shame because there's so much miscommunication about it. There's so many kind of wrong graphics shown. If I just look into, for example, the infection rates over time, yeah, where people compare the infection rates from the first wave to now the second wave and say, oh, it's really, really, you know, we have the biggest numbers since April. Yeah, but these numbers are not directly comparable because, you know, you had pretty much no testing at the beginning of the year, and now you have a lot of testing, at least for certain areas of the world. So there's a huge detection bias, but you need statisticians to step up. You need statisticians to have an influence to actually make these points. And I think, you know, of course you can say people should talk to statisticians, but I would turn it around and say statisticians need to have better influencing skills to actually, you know, move the needles there and make sure that the data is interpreted in the right way, not in the wrong way. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks a lot for dialing in. And if you have any additional questions, just yeah, contact me on LinkedIn. That's the easiest way. So just follow me there and then ask a question. Okay. Thanks so much. Have a nice rest of the day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.